In the New Testament, stories about Jesus often feature him reaching out and interacting with those who are stigmatized or rejected by society, from slaves to masters, from foreigners to sinners, from the sick and the crippled to the oppressed, the betrayed, or even the believers. We also live in a time of division and division. Today, many people try to categorize us into categories like black or white, male or female, free or bound. They want to determine which side we are on, friends or enemies. When we ask the familiar question, what would Jesus do? We see his example of healing, listening, and showing mercy. The Savior does not create separation. On the contrary, he promotes togetherness because all people are equal in the eyes of God. Similar to Jesus' time, society divided people into distinct groups based on fixed standards. By studying how Jesus transcended the boundaries and labels that society placed on them, we learn how to break down barriers and move closer to true harmony among people. One of the greatest divisions in Jesus' time was the separation between Jews and Gentiles. Jews were defined as those who belonged to one of the 12 tribes of Israel, primarily from the tribe of Judah. Meanwhile, Gentiles were anyone who was not a member of the Israelites and were considered outside the covenant race. As outsiders, they were often considered unclean. Many Jews even avoided entering the homes of Gentiles so as not to become ceremonially polluted. Among the Gentiles of the Roman era were Roman soldiers, often likened to the modern-day police force. They maintained peace and order in lands under Roman rule, including Israel. To the Jews, however, they were simply invaders seeking to impose control. A Roman soldier might even force a Jew to carry his belongings a mile. In this context, Jesus taught people to go the extra mile, an instruction that has come to symbolize the spirit of self-transcendence. Alongside the Gentiles and Jews, there was a mixed race group called the Samaritans. Centuries earlier, when the Assyrians took Israelites captive in the northern kingdom, they left the poorest behind to farm the land and intermarry with other Gentiles captured from distant lands. The Samaritans were a cultural and religious mix, but they were the most despised by the Jews. To avoid contact with them, many Jews would take a longer detour from Galilee to Jerusalem, just to avoid having to pass through Samaria. The women in that society were also despised. They were often viewed as property, had no legal rights to own land, and were not even recognized as reliable witnesses in court. Some Jewish men, especially priests, avoided contact with women because their menstrual blood made them ceremonially unclean. In the temple, women were required to stay in a separate area called the Court of Women to avoid defiling the priests. While men could enter this area, women were not allowed to enter the inner parts of the temple. Finally, there were lepers, a group that was completely marginalized. According to the law of Moses, anyone suffering from any kind of skin disease was considered ceremonially unclean. Such people were not allowed to live in the cities but had to retreat outside the walls, completely isolated from the community living inside. When coming into contact with lepers, Jews believed that they would be ceremonially unclean and would have to undergo a purification process to be considered clean. For this reason, they often tried to stay away from lepers and other groups of people they considered unclean. However, Jesus acted differently, seeking opportunities to approach, communicate, and interact with these people. In the Bible, we see many examples of Jesus overcoming prejudice, looking beyond social labels to see the true value of people. Here are 3 examples to illustrate. The first example is the story of a centurion, a Roman officer in command of 100 soldiers. The Jews of that time often viewed Roman officers as foreign oppressors who did not belong in their country. Yet when the centurion came to Jesus to ask for healing for his servant, Jesus did not reject or shun him, but instead listened to his story sincerely. Even more remarkable, even though the centurion was a Gentile, Jesus' words showed incredible tolerance. "I will come and heal him." This was very different, because many Jews often avoided entering the homes of Gentiles to avoid being ritually unclean. Understanding this, the centurion humbly said, "Lord, I am not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only say the word, and my servant will be healed." Instead of looking at him through the prejudiced lens of other Jews, Christ saw in him a strong faith and a sincere request. He saw him as someone worthy of healing, not an oppressor or an unclean person. The second example involves a Samaritan woman. While traveling with his disciples from Jerusalem to Galilee, Jesus, instead of avoiding the region of Sychar, as many Jews did, entered Samaria. There he stopped to rest at Jacob's well. A Samaritan woman approached the well and was surprised to see a Jew there. At this point, Jesus was not simply present, he broke the social barrier by asking the Samaritan woman for help. "Give me a drink." This must have surprised the woman, for not only was a Jewish man speaking to her, but he was also willing to drink from the cup she had touched. During this conversation, he taught her about the living water, the water that would quench thirst. Uniquely, he revealed to her that he was the Messiah, something that had never been said before. Unlike the attitude of many other Jews toward her, who viewed her as a Samaritan woman unworthy of attention or care, Jesus saw her as an important witness who could convey the message that the Messiah had come to save humanity. The final example is about a leper who came to Jesus to be healed. As Jesus came down from the mountain with a large crowd following him, he allowed the leper to come near him, an act of compassion and courage given the social beliefs of the time that leprosy was extremely unclean. Through these three stories, the image of Christ emerges as a savior who is not bound by prejudice or social boundaries. He sees the heart and faith of each individual, regardless of their background or circumstances, and offers them the hope and salvation that Jesus' next actions are especially significant, because in the society of that time, leprosy was considered a curse from God. Those afflicted with this disease were considered the most unclean, were ostracized from the community, and often had to live in isolation without the support of friends or family for fear of infection. However, Christ saw the leper differently than society had expected. He did not consider him unclean, unworthy, or rejected by God. He saw before him a suffering man seeking healing from the one he believed could free him from his pain. Jesus' words and actions are remarkable. He reached out, touched the man, and said, "I do, be clean." This action clearly demonstrated Jesus' boundless compassion, as well as his healing power for all who came to him. This is the most vivid display of mercy and healing that transcends all boundaries and prejudices. Christ taught us that he does not look at us through the lens of prejudice or worldly judgment. Instead, he looks at us with love and understanding, regardless of who we are or what we have done. Even though each of us may be labeled sinful, impure, or excluded from society, he is willing to sacrifice himself to save all of humanity. For him, there is no distinction between skin color, gender, status, or creed, because he sees only the soul and the intrinsic value of each individual. He knows each of our personal stories, feels the pain and desire to love in each person. He invites all to follow the path of love and unity. Just as Christ patiently faced his accusers in silence at his trial, there are times when we too need to choose silence in the face of controversy. Or, as he stood up strongly to defend the holiness of his Father's house, sometimes we too need to stand up bravely for justice and what is right. No matter what circumstances happen in life, we have the ability to overcome the prejudices or labels that society has placed on us. Instead of dividing, let us kneel together in prayer and serve everyone around us with love and tolerance. This is what Jesus wanted to convey and what he always did, for us to follow.